Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Tim McGuinness, the Managing Director of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, a government-registered incorporated nonprofit crime victims assistance and crime prevention organization based in Miami, Florida, with offices in Monterrey, Nuevo Leon, Mexico, as well as affiliates and partners in over 60 countries worldwide, including a SCARS office in Guangzhou, Guangdong, China, which is a separate partner of SCARS, as well as in partners in other countries like Indonesia, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, as well as in Poland, Bulgaria, and countries around the world. SCARS also directly interacts with law enforcement and government agencies around the globe. SCARS is a primary data collector for criminal complaints. We are also a formal Sentinel reporting partner for the United States Federal Trade Commission. We are also a partner of the United States Department of Homeland Security, Cyber Crimes and Infrastructure Security Agency, in our role as a crime victims assistance provider. So I want to welcome everybody to our monthly Q&A call. Again, I remind everyone to please keep your cameras off, or we'll have to remove you from the call. If you have questions, please drop them into the Zoom chat interface, and we'll be happy to answer them. I want to make two quick announcements before we begin and I introduce my guests, so please excuse me for that. First announcement is we're finally ready to launch our SCARS membership program beginning on December 1st. And the SCARS membership program will allow our members to have access to free goodies, things that we publish. In some cases will be available free to our members, as well as exclusive things like exclusive SCARS mugs, publications, etc. And your membership will help support SCARS and aid in our assistance of scam victims worldwide. And in addition, I'm quite pleased to announce that we have passed 3,000 convictions year to date in Nigeria. This is double year over year. We're very proud of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission in Nigeria for this incredible achievement. In addition, we received updated numbers from the Ministry of State Security in China, and they arrested in 2020. Unfortunately, they're about a year behind with their numbers. They arrested in 2020 1.9 million scammers, of which approximately 54% were online cyber criminals exploiting Chinese citizens. So even though we projected for 2021 a number of 540,000 cyber-enabled criminals arrested worldwide, based upon what China's reporting coming out of themselves, we're expecting that number to well exceed 1 million scammers arrested in 2021 and in 2022, since the numbers are only going up. All right, I want to begin our Q&A call today, and I apologize for delaying the introduction of our team and our guest. Let me start with our guest. Erin West is a rock star prosecutor from Santa Clara, California. She prosecutes cyber-enabled crime cases and does amazing work in money recovery for the victims in her jurisdiction. Erin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you join us today. Also with us today is Vianey Gonzales, who is a SCARS board member and officer and managing director of SCARS Latino America. from her office in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico. Are you okay? And then in addition, joining us with some technical challenges recently is Debby Montgomery Johnson, also a SCARS board member and officer from Hurricane Central in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Good afternoon, evening, Dr. Tim.
Happy storming.
Yeah, we're just at the beginning of the feeder bands right now. It'll get pretty bad tonight, a little bit north of us, but we're good. We're here.
Yep. So we have to watch this really carefully because one of the models showed that while the National Weather Service is predicting this will be a Cat 1 when it comes ashore, it can still spin up to potentially a Cat 3. So we got to watch this. As we learned over the years, their minute-by-minute estimates are pretty accurate, but hours in advance, never know. It can easily jump from 1 or 2 categories in a matter of a couple of hours. Alrighty, so basically, the way our Q&As work is we start with a topic and discuss that, allowing you to ask questions along the way, and then we'll have an open question period towards the end of the call where you can simply ask us anything, and we'll go from there. So one of the things that I wanted to begin with, Erin, is this topic of what has essentially become 2 different worlds of scamming in sort of our perception. There is the traditional scamming where individuals are sending money through Western Union, MoneyGram, gift cards, whatever the situation is. And then there is the crypto world. And the crypto world came upon us really quickly, beginning right at the beginning of the pandemic, coming out of China, and now that model has moved worldwide. We're seeing, according to the federal police in Brazil, they believe that about 30% of scams in Brazil are now what we call the pig butchering scams, or the dead pig plate scams, or whatever Chinese euphemism we want to use for these. Essentially a relationship coupled with an investment. And we've seen that the Nigerians are doing it. It's beginning to happen in Ghana. The Senegalese arrested their first pig butchering scammer about a week ago. Massively happening in India. Recently, the Indian police shut down 151 fraud call centers around their country in a massive raid, and documented what may be anything from 3,000 to 12,000 individuals. They don't prosecute everybody. They try to focus on the management, but unfortunately that leaves the individuals who've been trained to do this to go off and do it somewhere else. So what I was wondering is if maybe you could explain in a little more detail, since you prosecuted some of these cases, etc., what is a pig butchering scam and how do they work?
Sure, I'd be happy to. You know, it's interesting that you brought up the traditional romance scams that we're very familiar with that involve gift cards and moving money. And while occasionally, while there were major losses in those type of scams, what we're seeing with these cryptocurrency scams is that people are losing every last cent and then some. What's happening, the way these scams work are that individuals are contacted on a dating site or from a platform, generally a social media platform, and contact is made with them, and quickly the communication moves them off that platform into WhatsApp or Telegram or a different app, and then it's a long con. This will go on for weeks, months even, where the scammer will continue to romance this victim and to show them an enviable lifestyle, but without being overt about it. Ask questions like, I'm thinking of going to Hawaii. Should I stay at this resort or that resort? Should I buy this bag or that bag? Showing pictures of fancy food and fancy restaurants. And after a great deal of, after a relationship is built, where it doesn't seem to be out of nowhere, that scammer will then introduce to the victim the idea that, how I'm able to afford this is because my uncle taught me how to invest in cryptocurrency, and I know he would be interested in teaching you as well. And what we're seeing is that, first of all, the demographic is across the board. We're seeing older people, we're seeing younger people, we're seeing millennials, we're seeing seniors. This is happening to men and women, but I would say among the highest hit are our Asian American community. At least among the victims that I'm personally seeing. The way the scam works next is then the victim is led to believe that they are making an investment in a legitimate investment platform, and the scammer shows them results from that investment that are incredible, that show great gains, and that leads the victim to believe that that they should put more and more money into this, and they do, and they often, it's a combination of lures here. It's a combination of manipulation. It's not just a romance, but it's a romance sort of enhanced with the endorphins that come from money increasing in value and thinking that you're making smart decisions, you're learning something new, and right. Our victims then often liquidate college accounts. They borrow money from parents. They get their neighbors involved. But to me, the most devastating part of this, the clincher, if you will, is that then when a victim goes to try to remove money, that's when the scammer will say, oh, but you've got to pay tax on that first. And the victim will say, oh, we'll just take it from my gains. And they'll say, no, it has to be new money. And that's when oftentimes our victims are then taking out a loan on their homes, thinking that they'll be able to just turn this right around. And ultimately, after they put that additional amount in, and those taxes can often be as much as 25% of what's in the account. It's so obscene amounts of money are going into this. And whether it's, whether $1 million is someone's life savings or 50,000 is someone's life savings, they are taking every last penny from these victims. And so the losses, while some are more than others, the devastation is the same. It's, you've taken all my money, and you're not who I thought I was. I thought you were. I was in a relationship with you, and now I've lost literally everything.
And generally, we're finding that these are faster scams than we saw in the traditional romance scams, because the relationship begins quickly, but because of the nature of the investment opportunity, the scammers aren't delaying the way they are in romance scams over a much longer period of time to develop that control, since they're relying on the inherent, I hate to say it, greed of the individual looking for easy money on their investment. And I'm not criticizing that somebody wants to make a gain on their investment, but most of the pig butchering scams that we've been seeing are anywhere from 3-4 weeks to 2-3 months at most.
Agree. And I think that the scammers are able to utilize that type of a window because they are using the medium itself to say, hey, there's an opportunity tomorrow. You need to get in tomorrow. There's an opportunity in 36 hours. How much can you get together in 36 hours? So that they're not creating the fictitious situations of romance scams where you really do need to spread that out. This is a moving, it's understood that this would move quickly, and that so it's not questioned.
Exactly. And then once they've sent their money, what are you seeing that happens at that point?
So a lot of different things. There's a lot of points I could make about that. After they've sent their money, they then realize that they don't have access to it, and so there's a lot of different ways people respond. Some people respond and they'll write to me and say, you know, I'm in this weird investment situation. It doesn't feel right, but I think I'm still in it. And he's saying, you know, he can help me get my money back out, where they're still in the scam, but they're not really understanding how much of it is a scam. They're thinking that this actually was a true investment opportunity and they can't get out. So that's one way. Others, they're hit in the face with it and they realize, oh my gosh, everything's gone. So so their life savings gone. And then, you know, I think Dr. Tim, you'd probably have a much better gauge on what that reaction is post learning that, you know, yes. For some people, it appears to me that they come right to us. And then for other people, it takes months. And I think for other people, we'll never hear from them and we'll never know that this happened to them.
Well, one of the things I was getting at is, you know, one of the typical behavior, part of the operating script of this kind of scam, and they're published in the open, both in Chinese and in other languages, is that you're right. They develop fake apps that simulate an investment app or a website that do the same thing. So what we're seeing is that as soon as the person has sent the money, the app stops working for that particular person or the website, so they can't even see their accounts anymore. So it's a complete cutoff, unlike a regular romance scam where there's kind of a wind down usually where they try and extract every last penny. But in this particular case, once they've got the bulk, they cut their losses and they move.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is how it works. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, you know, we're seeing is there's really no differentiator in terms of who's doing these scams. The scam slavery centers in Southeast Asia, you know, they're aged from, you know, 20-year-olds all the way up to 40 years old. They abduct people who are looking for jobs usually. Sometimes it's tourists. But in the case of Latin America, it's people of the same age as regular scammers. In fact, this is a transitional trend where the traditional scammers that we've grown to know involved in regular relationship scams, they're switching over to this one because it's so much easier for them. They don't have to maintain the fiction in the same way that they have to in a romance scam. It's faster and an easier cultivation, grooming, manipulation, and control.
Not only that, Dr. Tim, but the numbers are just absolutely skyrocketing in terms of the amount of money that they can squeeze out of their victims. Because in a traditional romance scam, you're generally not convincing the victim to give away to provide the scammer with all the money they have, wherein in this situation, just the scale is astronomical of what a victim will lose.
We've, in a typical romance relationship scam, we see typically that the average dollar amount, according to the FBI, is around $9,000. The FTC says it's about $14,000. But in this particular case, we're seeing averages that are in the hundreds of thousands. And literally almost every day we see a victim who's given away more than $1 million. That
is a fact. That is exactly what I'm seeing. That is the, you mentioned that we've had some success in seizing money, and that's as a result of that. I've had victims reach out to me nationally and internationally, and I'm seeing on a daily basis huge numbers, over $1 million on repeat.
And can you talk a little bit about, and Debby or Vianey, feel free to jump in here, but could you talk a little bit about the methodology, how government is able to track this down and seize this money for people that are not even within this country, not even within your jurisdiction?
Right. I think the beauty of that enables us to have success for victims in this scam is that it is all being done on a public blockchain. So that's the beauty of cryptocurrency, whereas it would take us a long time to track US dollars, to track dollars from bank to bank to bank with search warrants. We can use pretty sophisticated tools that are available to us that, some are available for free online, and others, I happen to, so I work with a task force. I work with a group of detectives from a number of different agencies, and we have some federal partners, and we have a grant from the state of California that enables us to be able to license really sophisticated software that allows us to see better what's happening on the blockchain. So the task force I work with had some familiarity already with cryptocurrency from cases in 2018 and 2019. So when we started learning about these cases, a benefit of our task force was we were already trained in how to trace the blockchain. So in these cases, we are able to, just like any good detective tries to do, we're able to follow the money. And what we do is we follow when the money leaves. We know where it went. The victim tells us where they started, which is often a US-based cryptocurrency exchange. They're directed to put it in there. From there, they unwittingly put it into a scammer's wallet. They think it's going into an investment platform, but really that's a scammer's wallet.
Can I ask a question here? Yeah. One of the beautiful aspects of this, maybe wrong word, but nevertheless, is unlike trying to trace money through traditional channels, banks, transfer agencies, whatever, you don't need a warrant to be able to trace this. You just pull up a piece of software with the starting wallet, and you can trace it through to the endpoint where the crypto is residing without a warrant, because it's public and visible. Is that right?
That's absolutely the benefit of the blockchain. Yes, and I would agree with you that it is beautiful. This is the way illicit money is moving, but yet we have the opportunity to watch it move.
Right.
So that's what we do. So we see where it goes, and then we trace it until it goes to an exchange where we know that the exchange will comply with a US subpoena. So or search warrant. So you're very correct that a lot of this goes to international platforms that traditionally would not be available to US law enforcement. And I think it's a common misconception. And actually one of the major problems that victims face is there's a misconception among law enforcement who isn't trained in this type of investigation that it's gone. That, once it goes into cryptocurrency, it's gone and it's not recoverable. Or once it goes overseas, it's gone and not recoverable. But the fact is, as long as it goes to an exchange that is willing to cooperate with US law enforcement, then we are able to serve papers upon them and recover that money. So the way that works is we get a search warrant like we would for any stolen property. If we knew where a garage full of stolen bikes were, we would get a warrant for that garage. In this case, we know which virtual asset we know who's holding these assets, and so we get a warrant for them, and there are exchanges that will comply with those warrants, and from there we're able to retrieve, to claw back some of this victim money, and we've had decent success with that.
And so it really is a question of, you can trace it without anybody's permission. Once you've identified it, you can issue a warrant, get a court order to seize it. I noted that in the last few days, the federal government had an incredible success in this area of being able to seize more than $3 billion in crypto.
Yeah.
Familiar with that case?
I definitely am. I think that what we learned from that is that, first of all, is the transparency of the blockchain, that we can keep our eyes on where things are, and when they get to a place where we can grab them, we can, and that that even things that some might think are long buried are still visible on the blockchain. So I like that case a lot for a number of reasons. The detectives who worked on that case, you know, everybody was brand new to blockchain investigation at one point, right? Like, this was a new area, and the detectives who worked on those cases really started from scratch. They just rolled up their sleeves and they got into it, and they were from the IRS criminal investigations, and they knew how to trace money. And they did it the old-fashioned way. They did it with Excel spreadsheets and without fancy software, and with putting notations all over a whiteboard and following that money. And I think what that is a great testament to, if you want to figure out how to do this, you can figure out how to do this. That it's not rocket science learning how to navigate blockchain. It's learnable, it's doable, and that's part of the mission I've given myself now, is that we've got to inspire local law enforcement to be ready for victims when they walk through the door, that we've got to have somebody who is trained and available to them when they walk through the door. Because as we know, and is that they don't always report day one. And I know Debbie's very familiar with that, and we've talked about that before, that it takes a while for them to come to terms and be ready to deal with what they find is a humiliating story. And so by the time they show up at law enforcement, we've got to be ready. We can't then say, oh my goodness, we don't know what to do with this case. We've got to be ready day one to say, give us the addresses and we'll trace them right now, and we'll figure out if there's anything to do with this case.
Exactly.
I made a quick comment earlier, though, Erin, the difference I think between the crypto scamming and the typical relationship, the old stuff, old stuff, is that going into the pig butchering, I think that the participants want to be making money. And so when they lose it, they're mad, because I mean, if I lost money in an investment, I'd be upset too. It's a different kind of loss, at least in my mind, initially. In a romance scam, for me, it was hide what I did because I was so embarrassed about it. If I were to lose money in an investment and found that it was fraud like this, I'd be super ticked off. Tim's rolling his head. That's me. I would report it faster, I think, than I was willing to be able to do a relationship scam that's pure relationship. I was never looking for money.
Yeah, I think Dr. Tim made it clear, and I'd love to hear his thoughts on that, but I am seeing that with victims, in terms of there's definitely an anger and a frustration that is different than a traditional romance scam, which oftentimes people are heartbroken and very upset about the loss of the relationship in this, they're really angry that they got taken advantage of, I think is a common feeling. What do you think?
That's the feeling I had when I got that fishing expedition on Facebook the other day, because I got shut down and I had no control and I couldn't see anything anymore. So I imagine if you've lost control of your financials and you can't see it, talk about frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, see, there's a little bit of a misconception in some of that.
I'm just saying.
So first off, these are relationship scams. Pig butchering scams are relationship scams. It's all about developing a trust relationship, which is our definition of a relationship scam, whether it's a romance or a pig butchering, because they have to develop that level of trust before the victim will entrust their financial advice. In some ways, it's very similar to a Ponzi scheme. But
Sure.
the difference is that with a Ponzi scheme, with a traditional investment scam, there is a different presentation. You're still dealing with somewhat a known stranger. In these cases, you're not dealing with a stranger. You're dealing with somebody that you know and trust because they develop that trust relationship first. And in the victims that we interact with, they have every one of the hallmark, the tick boxes that a romance scam victim has. The one difference that's a principal difference is the duration of the scam. The duration of the manipulation and control is quite different in terms of its depth. Because the pig butchering scammer only has to lead the victim to the front door and they willingly walk through it. In the case of a romance scam, they have to lead them every step of the way until they disengage. So there's less of a control element, but there's every bit as much of a deception element. Now, one of the things that we're also seeing is that there is a higher percentage of pig butchering scams that are being reported. Best guesstimate today is that it's about 6%. But it may be much lower than that. It may be down to 3 or 4. But a big part of the reason for that is there's so much bogus information being spread around that the minute it's gone, it's gone. Again, so the same is true with romance scams. You know, people don't understand that the Federal Reserve System allows for a clawback months after the money was sent. And that Interpol has a complete training process to teach local law enforcement how to do that. So part of it is false information being spread around. Part of it is the lack of training with local law enforcement officers. Part of it is the simple fact that victims in general, the majority of victims will not ever report these crimes. In the case of a romance scam, it's 97 to 99% will never report them.
I think if people didn't realize that they weren't alone, that they may be a little more willing in time. But there's a good question here, and this might be one reason to report is that one of our folks asked, when cryptocurrency is clawed back, does the scammer lose the money?
They sure do.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah. So when I started working on these cases and it became clear to me at the beginning that we were not going to be able to make arrests. We're not going to be able to get our hands on these scammers. So what can we do? I came up with 3 things I wanted to do, and they were educate, seize, and disrupt. And I work on all 3 of them every day. And today we had a great educational meeting. We had 250 people in our group, and we heard from Binance today. We had Binance come to our meeting and talk to us about how to work better with that exchange. And then the next one is seizing, and that the concept that if we start taking back away from these scammers and we do it in mass, and it's not just Santa Clara County, but it's Santa Clara County and it's Queens County, New York, and it's Las Vegas and it's Seattle, then that starts to make a bigger dent. And that leads me to my 3rd thing, which is disrupt, to somehow disrupt this operation in a way that it makes it more difficult for them to go about their business.
Is the money going back to the individual victims?
It will. I think that we are dealing with the legal process of it right now, but just like if we found the garage full of stolen bicycles, we would then figure out who those bicycles belong to, and we would get them back to their rightful owners. And so there is a process that we have to go through in order to make sure anybody whose bicycle it could be is notified. So we're going through that notification process, and I'm hoping by the end of the year, we'll be able to put money back in the hands of victims.
I think I'd be willing to report it if I knew I might get some of that money back.
Right, yeah.
Well, the truth is, from our perspective, the majority of victims probably could get some or all of their money back. But that's a question of timeliness. You've got to talk to the police immediately. I mean, literally, time matters. But even so, even with wire transfers. Now, the one that you're just not going to happen is going to be gift cards. Mm. Fortunately, those have become so difficult for scammers to fudge that only the lowest level scammers want gift cards these days. Talking about the legal process, is it challenging because the money is seized under a search warrant or a seizure order, but there's no prosecution to attach it to? Is that one of the complications in this process?
It is one of the complications in this process. I think that in other cases, in some of my initial cases where we kind of cut our teeth on cryptocurrency cases back in 2018 and 2019, we had the hackers in custody who stole the cryptocurrency, and we had an ongoing case against them. So we had a lawyer for that scammer to be able to negotiate with and say, you know, is your guy willing to forfeit his interest in this money so that we can get it back to victims now? It's much easier when you have a victim before, a scammer before the court that is represented by a qualified attorney than it is to say, hey, we found this and we want to give it back to a victim. A judge is going to want to give due process to anyone else who might be the legitimate owner of those funds. And so it does complicate it that there's not an obvious person in front of the court.
I know at the federal level, often when they arrest a scammer gang, there are members who are not in the country and they're tried in absentia. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is that an option in these particular cases, just so that there can be a adjudication and a sentencing?
Yeah, I think that I don't think that would speed up the process.
Okay.
I think that because for that to happen, especially in our COVID impacted courts at the moment, to get a case through to trial and completion is going to take substantially longer than it'll take to get a hearing before a judge to say, here's the rightful owner, here's how we know it's the rightful owner. We've given notice to the account holder of the cryptocurrency. They have not come forward with legitimate means of acquiring this cryptocurrency. So therefore, judge, you should have a hearing and give it to the victim. And I think that that is how this will transpire, at least in Santa Clara County, and that will be more expeditious than doing a trial in absentia.
Do you think, this is kind of an off-the-wall question, but do you think that because of the volume of these cases, current estimate is 1 in 10 Americans will be the victim of a scam each year, which says that some victims are one and done and others are scammed over and over and over and over again?
Right.
Do you think that this country needs a separate court system for cyber-related crimes? Judges are experts in the subject matter.
Well, it's interesting, Dr. Tim. You're certainly hitting on all of the issues I grapple with daily. You know, how do we first of all, how do we educate our judges about this? I mean, if we assume that this is new for all of our investigators and our prosecutors, then we have to also assume this is new for our judges. And while we have, I saw a question earlier from Debbie about how are we sharing this information, and I can talk about that in a minute. We are actively sharing it in a way that I don't think that the judges are. So how do we get that education to the court as well? So Debbie, I think it's become sort of a given in this new cryptocurrency world that education is needed. And I think a lot of different entities have stepped up to say, well, we'll help with that. And even I was hearing from Binance this morning from Matt Price saying, hey, we've got a team that'll come teach a 3-day class on how to take a cryptocurrency case from someone walking in the door to getting it done. My team has recognized this, and my team is having a 2-day conference in January where that's exactly what we're going to teach. We're going to have you, it's going to be a hands-on workshop experience where it's not going to be a bunch of people talking philosophically about crypto. It's going to be, hey, my captain just told me he lost $200,000 in a scam. What do we do? What is step one? Okay, I have an address. What do I do with that? Okay, I know about a Bitcoin ATM. What do I do with that address? And just really take them through actual life skills that they're going to need to have in order to function in this crypto world. So yeah, you've hit on an issue. Yes, it's exploding, and we're way behind the 8 ball in terms of educating our law enforcement force on how to manage this.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for all of the incredible information. So valuable, and we appreciate the opportunity to listen to you and to be able to share this. Are there any other critical points that you think victims themselves should know? Because again, as you know, we communicate primarily with victims. Now, you raised a really interesting topic that I'd actually like to get into on LinkedIn, and I, of course, jumped in with both feet.
I loved it.
And that is the topic of how do we educate for avoidance? My opinion, not so humble, is all avoidance training fails, because that's the fact. It fails in the corporate context. All cybersecurity training fails. It's one of those things that the military understands, but the corporate world doesn't, because of cognitive biases and all that good stuff. They believe what they expect to be true. Military knows, I'm a veteran, Debbie Montgomery's a veteran, is you can't just give people information. You have to change their mindsets and their behaviors. That's what boot camps are for. It's not about running and jumping and shooting. It's about changing behavior from thinking like a civilian to thinking like a member of the military, so that you don't die in the first 5 seconds of a firefight. Our communication with the corporate world has been, do everything that you believe is the right thing to do for avoidance and hardening your firewalls and securing your defenses. But uniformly, what they all fail to do is train for mitigation. What I mean by that is, in the corporate world, you're going to have a cyber attack. But then what happens if all of your people have no idea what to do or how to think or how to respond once the attack is in progress? And this is a real problem with scam victims. We see scam victims on the worst day of their life, immediately following the scam, and they're in complete panic, they're in shock, they're in disarray, and it's a challenge to lead them out of that chaotic spiral of darkness to a point where they can begin to function and process grief at the same time. But we have thousands of articles that we've been publishing on our principal website now for 23 years. And I've been educating about this topic for, well, in February, it'll be 32 years. Nothing works because nobody believes it will happen to them. And Debby is our most recent poster child. She got caught in a phishing attack and lost access to her social media account. And all of the same characteristics of any victim come right back up to the surface. I'm not trying to abuse you, Debby, much.
Yeah, you are, I know. And it had nothing to do with money. It was just access.
But for your case, it was fortunate that it wasn't it was social media account and that it wasn't your bank account, because it just really could have been.
Well, and for me, again, it turns into a beware and be aware. And I've been on a couple of podcasts since then and have been talking specifically about what happened, because it happened so quickly and I was distracted. I didn't take that pause. And it also led me to talking to a gal the other day about your comment, Tim. We don't train. We don't have a driver's school for being online. And we're throwing our children and grandchildren on the computers without any training. Maybe we need to start doing something in elementary school. You know, by the time they get to our age, they might be a little more aware of what happens. But
we used to have home ec in school.
We did.
When you came out of middle school, you had some household skills.
I could make an omelet.
Typing. I'm a really great typist.
Well, typing was kind of, you were good. Everybody had to be able to type. But we don't do any of that anymore.
No.
So, I think my own opinion and sort of, the official policy is we do everything that we can to educate people to avoid scams. But we know that really what we're doing is trying to educate them so that they avoid the second scam. Now, really would like to hear your thoughts, though, on avoidance education.
Well, I would love to say that I loved the Venn diagram that you put in there.
That was the after event. There's a grayscale one of today. I posted one also.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll take a look at that. I liked the color one for sure. Well, I can tell you for me, having been living and breathing these pig butchering scams for the last 6 months, literally all day, every day. I
imagine you become a vegan now after.
Yeah, at least no bacon, but it became more to me than just clawing back money and figuring out how to claw back money. I felt as though I needed to take a dive into, okay, what's the bigger picture here? Like, I don't have an army. I don't have diplomatic relationships with these countries where this is happening. How can I, what else could I do? And so I started to look at a number of things. One of the things I thought about was what can be done for victims to turn them around. And I don't know that I disagree with you. I think that probably that's going to be one of those battles that we fight and actually doesn't have that much impact. Another battle I started to fight was, well, what if we could impact how the scammers are getting to our victims? So I reached out to platforms to say, what are you doing to keep these people off your platform? Well, we're working. I don't know that they appreciate the information that I have about what's happening from their platforms. That I don't think they.
You're familiar with the Communication Decency Act, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They would only worry about it if it was their mother that had gotten taken.
No, they would only worry about it if it impacted their shareholder value and they were liable. That's the only way to change this, in my opinion.
But scammers
Yeah.
are their clients.
Yeah, yeah. I was hoping that I could generally appeal to them in the concept of it's much better for their brand to have a clean platform. So I continue to work, but I will say that yes, I'm interested in at any point. Is there any way I could throw more daggers at this? Where are the other points of weakness where I could have any kind of effect? So I'm always open to thoughts, and but I wasn't surprised that you would respond to my LinkedIn in that way, and I welcome the discussion. I don't know that putting a warning label on a dating platform is going to have any effect, because I don't believe that victims know their victims at that point.
Well, we've seen the efficacy of that with cigarette labeling.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
It actually wasn't until we saw profound societal rejection of cigarettes where people just stopped allowing cigarettes to be smoked in buildings and in their homes and in their cars. And you couldn't smoke here, you couldn't smoke there. It wasn't until really that societal change that we started to see a significant change. Ironically, cigarette smoking is back on the increase. Labeling doesn't work. In my opinion, what the chairwoman of the FTC and the FTC is considering, and we gave testimony to this a few months back, is, as the Venn diagram basically says, I believe it all begins in Congress with a modification of the Communication Decency Act so that the platforms become liable under a specific condition, but we also must not overlook our buddy Elon Musk, because he's very aware of this. He's now talking about a very simple solution for his platform, a paywall. Everybody's got to be a paid member. Costs you $8 a month if you want a verified check mark, but he's talking about maybe $2 a month to have a Twitter account. And while he'll lose lots of people, Twitter will become a vastly more sanitized platform as a result. And I frankly think Facebook should do the same. It will help their revenue model. And the fact that you got to have a credit card and pay month after month after month is a form of identity verification. But really what it comes down to is the law that was proposed by the congressman in the Bay Area, that all online accounts should be verified because there is no civil right to anonymity, I think is a great step forward. But it's really, we've got to change the platform's perspective. And maybe it's going to take a large-scale corporate fraud case to do this. In my opinion, Facebook is committing commercial and shareholder fraud. Why? Because if 50% of their accounts are fake, then their published shareholder value is 50% what they put in their statements. If 50% of the accounts are fake, they're defrauding their advertisers. Because there may be one human being that's responsible for 1,000 accounts. That's actually how it's working. You can go into the dark web and you can pay, a couple of dollars and get a dozen fake Facebook accounts. You can pay $20 and get a dozen accounts taken over.
It's interesting though, for me to get my account back last week, I had to send them a copy of my driver's license. And it took multiple times. They said it's not clear enough, it's not this, it's not that. And I finally, after a week, was able to get it through. But I was able to set up a second one with you, Tim, and I didn't have to have any identification on that one.
No, you don't. The one thing that concerns me the most at the moment is the announced layoffs that are going to happen in Facebook. because they're digging deeply into their moderators. So it means more algorithmic moderation, which is a complete failure. I'm somewhat radicalized against the platforms in this regard because it's a bit like looking at the auto industry in the mid-1970s, where they were completely rejecting the notions of automobile safety. And if you compare that with today, most people survive significant accidents. In those days, almost nobody survived significant accidents. But anyway, I digressed and moved on. Do any of our audience have questions? You've all been very quiet. So in the time that's remaining, which is not very much, we'd love to hear from our listeners. There's a few dozen of you, so do you have questions? And you can ask your questions in English or in Spanish, because we have Vianey here to answer your questions in Spanish, or yo también.
Something that I want to say is that it's very sad because most of the people are interested in learning about cybersecurity, and that's until they were victims or scammed. And also many victims don't want to learn about scam or cybersecurity, and that's very sad because we have a lot of information.
But I do think a lot of people want to learn about crypto. I mean, that's the big thing. My nephews are like, "Oh, Aunt Deb, you got to invest in this and that." And that generation is like, and I'm thinking, are you kidding? I'm not getting near it. But it's something that all my financial groups are talking about too. And people want to learn about it, but it's that quick, get the money. Not going to work. We got a comment here.
We have a question here.
Yep, there is a question.
Go ahead, Debbie.
If my detective is already working with the U.S. Marshals to recover my money, would it help to contact your firm? And are you in California? It was all in Bitcoin, apparently.
Erin is not with a firm. She is a prosecutor with the County of Santa Clara, a county of the state of California. She is a government prosecutor.
I would say that if you are already working with the U.S. Marshals, you are in great shape. That sounds to me like someone has found your money and is the Marshals are who takes custody of it once money is found. So it sounds to me like you're in very good hands.
Okay.
Good start. Good to know. Better than when I went to the FBI and they said, oh, nothing we can do.
I know.
And I have a question related to that, and that is, there are a vast number of so-called private recovery services that are out there. and what I find absurd about this is, A, that victims will pay someone who can't do what they advertise they do, because no matter what the company is, it can't recover the money without the court order.
That is exactly right. And so that is really funny. That is another topic we discussed on my group today about the problems. They're fraught with problems. Number one, nobody can recover that money without a court order. It has to go through law enforcement. So if they are advertising themselves as we can get these assets back, that's fraudulent. Number two, they are often not good at the tracing they're doing. And so what they're doing is they are tracing in a way that we would not trace. They're taking steps beyond what is really recoverable. And then they're giving false hope to victims saying, oh, you can't, there is money, you can get it back. And it sounds like the law enforcement you're working with isn't doing what they should be doing. So now we have our victims coming back to us and saying, well, I heard that you could be doing this, this, and this. And unfortunately, they're getting bad advice from people who are not in law enforcement. And then the final thing with that is the concept that they would be paying money for something that they're sort of entitled to get. that you're entitled to have a law enforcement officer take a look at your case, and you shouldn't have to pay someone $10,000 to do it and then send you right back to my office.
I have one last question before we close. Can a private litigation, a civil court litigation, result in the same recovery?
Well, if you think it through, that private litigation would have to identify a subject to sue. Okay, so you're going to sue Chinese organized crime? I mean, who is it you're suing?
Exactly.
Right? Like, if we knew who your victim, if we had a name for your suspect and we had access to them and authority over them, they would be in custody. So I just, unfortunately, that route's not as easy as you might think.
One last question, and that deals with money mules here in the United States. Our view is that the majority of money mules that we come in contact with were unwitting money mules. However, there is a trend worldwide now to hold money mules more and more responsible for their participation in the crime. Are you seeing that trend as well? Particularly for money mules that do not come forward and do not report these crimes? And
Yeah,
just under the bed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly a case-by-case situation. I'm familiar with situations in which money mules have been warned and then continue to operate. I mean, that's certainly criminal behavior. There are certainly money mules who definitely the situation that they were involved in makes no common sense, and so it would be hard to imagine that they didn't have some complicity in the criminal enterprise. I don't think money mules should get a pass unless, I mean, it's a case-by-case situation, and I think people should be accountable for the amount of culpability they have in this money laundering operation.
Okay. We've submitted amicus briefs in a couple of cases for non-compos mentis for money mules, because I think it's self-evident in some cases that the manipulation was so significant as to impair them. But
right.
I want to thank you. We've reached the end of our hour. So if there's any last questions, you've got just a few seconds to get them in. Debbie, do you have any last questions?
No, but I'm looking at the chat, and there were two that came in. One was from a person in Canada saying, are there any leads? Are the Canadians working on this in any significant way that you might know about? And also the other one is, was there a way for private citizens to volunteer? I'm not quite sure. Volunteer for what other than reporting? But how about the Canadian one first, Erin?
I do. I was emailing with one of my Canadian colleagues today. There definitely are skilled investigators in Canada. If that person wants to, it says my case is closed, so I'm not sure if it was investigated or not. But if you know, please reach out. Please reach out. I'm findable on LinkedIn. I'm Erin Nordby West, and if I can be helpful to you or connect you to someone, I'd be happy to do that.
Do you find that the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center agency is the center point for this, or is this being handled like it is here in the United States, somewhat randomly from agency to agency? Also, one last question with regard to that. What do you find the expertise level to be at the state cyber crimes units who are part of the state police?
We're all learning.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. As far as the volunteer question, SCARS does accept volunteers, and we have our mentor program, which we will relaunch right after the first of the year if you're interested in that.
Oh, Norby, I'll put my name in the chat.
Well, I want to personally thank Erin. I've learned so much from you, and it gives me great hope law enforcement, for prosecutors, between you and the folks that we saw in Dallas, there is help out there that's little by little, and with folks that really want to help. And I thank you for that, because that gives us as survivors and advocates great hope that this might change.
I hope so. I wasn't able to do the chat. It's NORD like dog, B like boy, Y. Erin Nord V West.
Actually, I just published your LinkedIn profile.
Thank you. There you go.
There you go.
Yes.
So if anyone wants to send a connection request to Erin or to ourselves on LinkedIn, we're all there. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you, Debby. Thank you, Vianey, for joining us today on our monthly Q&A call. And we'll be doing this again approximately mid-December. Erin, let me give you the last word.
Yeah, I just honestly am really grateful for the work that this organization does. I think you serve such a valuable role, and anything that we can do to continue to work together and get victims, get earlier reporting of victims to the right investigators, I'm all for and happy to assist with.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I want to thank everybody who attended our call today. I think this was a great call. We will post the video on our social media and YouTube channel, etc. And I thank everybody for participating. Of course, this video is copyright 2022, Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. I'm Dr. Tim McGuinness with my extraordinary guests, Erin West, prosecutor from Santa Clara County, California, USA, Debby Montgomery Johnson, SCAR's board member, Vianey Gonzales, SCAR's board member and managing director of SCAR's Latino America. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.